We're finally here. My first out-of-state destination. This is Syracuse, New York. I'm sitting here in the car recording this intro, and I'm looking out at the scenery, and it's just trees, right? It's just trees, but they're beautiful, and the grass and the bushes, and it's all just gorgeous. Like everything here in upstate New York is absolutely amazing. It's people come to New York, but they come for New York City, and that makes sense, right? That's all well and good because New York City's awesome. But I do wish there was more attention being brought to New York State because it's stunning. It's so beautiful. I absolutely love it. Coming up here, there's so many parks and like everything, and even just driving. Like, there's going to be a lot of driving shots in this videos where I'm just like in the car recording, because it's just I wanted to record all these landscapes for the video, absolutely, but also just so I can see them again. Because when I go back home to Daytona, I know I'm gonna miss this place because it's amazing. This video is gonna cover Syracuse, New York, and some surrounding cities. But first, it's actually going to cover the road trip here because we didn't fly here. We actually drove up here from Daytona Beach. It was a long and somewhat interesting drive up here. It was a fun drive. I enjoyed it, and it might, maybe you'll find it interesting. So it's going to start with the road trip. Then we're going to talk about Syracuse, and then a couple others, like not really cities, but a couple other towns that surround it. Then it's going to be a follow-up video covering Albany and Cooperstown, which are about two hours from Syracuse, roughly. It's not going to be as long. We're not going to be there as long, but it's going to be cool seeing like the New York Capitol and like Baseball Hall of Fame and such. And then we're going to go cross the border and we're going to go into Ottawa in Canada, and that I am incredibly excited for. I have been to Canada once. I've been to Vancouver, but I hear Ottawa's absolutely gorgeous. I hear it's a great city. It might be a little rainy or cloudy while we're there. We can hope for the best, but if it is, it'll be cool to see it in a different light, But I'm really excited to go to Ottawa. And then, finally, on the way down, back to Florida, we're actually going to stop in Charlotte, North Carolina. I have a friend who told me that it's a beautiful city, and I was like, yeah, it'd be pretty cool to visit. And that's where we're going to head to end off this little road trip series, I guess. So I'm super excited for that as well because I hear Charlotte's amazing. So yeah, road trip time, then Syracuse time. This is the Odyssist. We woke up pretty early in the morning and immediately left Daytona Beach, and I was ready for this. We drove for a while through Georgian wilderness, but then we passed Charlotte, which is a point of interest because, like I said, we're actually going to be coming down here on the way back. Eventually, we ended up in the Blue Ridge Mountains, and I don't think I've actually ever driven through here before, even when making a similar drive, and if I did, I definitely didn't notice how gorgeous it was. It's absolutely stunning. I've always loved seeing and being on mountains, and what a view from a lot of the places that we drove, like through the Blue Ridge Mountains. What a view, man. And as we drove, things started to flatten out, which wasn't a bad thing because we saw some pretty cool stuff, like farmland, for example, and we saw animals, and long drives are just so great. I personally love them because even though they can be draining, it's really cool seeing different things from this perspective. And then eventually we ended up in New York State. From here, it wasn't all that long to Syracuse, but the landscapes only got prettier. And as we were driving on the freeway here, of course, we saw the sign for Syracuse and Albany, which we'll be visiting later. Here, I wasn't even like watching movies or listening to music anymore. I was just looking out the window at the scenery because it's spectacular. It's absolutely amazing. Eventually, the city of Syracuse was in sight, and then we got into the city, and I just was super excited to come to downtown. And then we finally reached our destination after like 18 hours of driving. We are finally here. That took forever. Now it's time for the actual video. The Salt City, Syracuse, located in upstate New York. Home to the prestigious university, this city has a lot to offer both in beauty and things to do. Besides the obvious nature aspect of it, the downtown area is actually pretty cool and has some pretty cool things to do, including some modern architecture, old architecture, and of course, the university. So now we are at the university. I never really toured a university before, and this was an excellent first one to check out. It is a stunning campus, and I can only imagine the amount of opportunities that students must have here. There was art on the walls, even there were these statues, like these monuments that talked about history of the place, history of the city, the sports in the university, and it was really cool. I'll talk more about this beautiful university in the history section, but downtown has more to offer than just the university. For example, the Museum of Science and Technology, or MOST for short. This place has a bunch of wacky gizmos that are interactive. You can actually mess around with them. Talks about, science and technology, but what I didn't expect was, also anatomy and things like that. I was more so expecting just science and, interactive gizmos and such. But here, even they have rocks and gems on display that you can actually look at, some fossils even. And I had never really been interested in rocks, but I gotta say, reading about them and actually learning more about them, it's actually a pretty interesting subcategory of science. They had stuff talking about finding fossils or even color and how wavelengths determine how colors look. And while I was initially kind of hesitant because this place is definitely aimed more towards kids, it's very clear that anybody can enjoy this. Anyone who's into science or interested in learning about science. They have so many interesting topics that you can actually look at. And like I said, everything's interactive. There's most things at this museum you can touch and you can hold and you can mess around with, see what happens. They have this section about the Earth's crust, the Earth's core, how it all functions. They have a section talking about plate tectonics and how that works with continents and everything. The density of different minerals that make up our Earth. Just really interesting stuff. And while it might not be applicable in day-to-day life, it is pretty cool stuff to know about, I'll say. Geomagnetism. Do rocks have memory? That's not a question I ever asked myself, but apparently they do. They have this little sandbox where you could dig around and, quote, find fossils, which is pretty cool. They even had this section talking about bedrock, the stuff from Minecraft. They also have these tunnels here, but I was not even going to try to fit into them. Upstairs, they had this pretty cool technology section that talked about how different things work, different forms of storage, stuff about technology. They had this deconstructed phone that basically told you all the parts and what they do, which I've never seen it before. They also had this deconstructed PS5, tells you how that works, and just talking about how different forms of technology, the things we use all the time, how they operate. And, we don't really give a second thought to that. Like this room that talks about the inside of a chip, what goes on inside a chip, how a chip works when it comes to technology. Going back to different types of storage, this was the first time in a while that I had seen a floppy disk. And it talks about SD cards, micro SD cards, flash drives and all that. And here's a deconstructed VR headset. And then over here, there's actually an entire thing about energy. Like solar energy, thermal energy, electrical energy, kinetic energy, all that. This thing was talking about oil. And then there was this cool dinosaur exhibit. There wasn't much there, but they had animatronic dinosaurs, which is awesome. That was pretty cool. And now it's starting to rain. After the museum, we drove for a little bit in this soggy weather, but eventually arrived in the town of Skaneateles, which is a small but beautiful town. So now we are briefly checking out this town of Skaneateles here. It's a small but charming locale that's located pretty close to Syracuse. There was this really long deck that we actually watched this boat come out of here, and the water is crystal clear. I had an urge to just kind of jump in and swim. It's absolutely gorgeous. Looking around, you could actually see a bunch of houses and stuff. It must be nice to live here. This is such a nice view, bro. And what a view it was. Even though we were here very briefly, I think if you're going to Syracuse, Skaneateles is definitely worth checking out. It's for that deck alone, really. Syracuse actually traces its roots back to the early 17th century. The name was chosen as a reference to the ancient Greek city of Syracuse in Sicily due to military prowess and cultural recognition. The Erie Canal is very important to Syracuse's history as it allowed it to become a sort of major transportation hub. It allowed them to transport goods and people to various different regions, and it also brought prosperity and it fueled the expansion of industries such as salt production, which is extremely important. Speaking of salt production, Syracuse gets its name, the Salt City, because of said salt production. Thanks to the lucrative salt industry boom in the mid-19th century, the region's abundant salt springs, particularly in the Onondaga Lake, provided valuable natural resources that fueled the growth of the economy. And of course, there's the prestigious Syracuse University, which was founded in 1870. Its establishment marked a significant milestone in the city's history as the university became a prominent educational institution which was known for its excellence, and it's still widely renowned even today. In the late 20th century, going into the early 21st century, Syracuse underwent urban renewal and revitalization efforts, which turned it into the city that we know and love today. All in all, Syracuse is a city with beautiful nature and awesome architecture and a really great culture, definitely worth visiting. That's a wrap for Syracuse. So I'm in Ottawa right now, and the Ottawa video is going to be after the videos about Baseball Hall of Fame and Bolt Castle. Those are going to be two pretty cool ones. After that, we're going to talk about this beautiful city, the capital of Canada. Thanks for checking this out. Remember, whether your life's carefree or busy as could be, always remember to leave a little bit of room for wonder.